You know, global warming is wreaking havoc all over the world, folks. That's right, but psst, don't tell Donald Trump. Although soon he won't be able to escape it, all right? Right now there is a huge locust outbreak in Africa, particularly East Africa, and now it's spread all the way to South Sudan. Apparently the swarms are the size of entire cities. Yikes, okay? They're moving across entire countries. We're talking Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, Tanzania, Uganda, and Djibouti. Apparently widespread above average rain pounded the Horn of Africa between October and December 2019. It was up 400% as to what rainfall normally is in that part of the world at that part of the year. And that is such good news for locusts. They love it. And they're breeding. And we should tell you that these swarms, they're fueled by extreme weather and, of course, the changing global patterns. And the United Nations Environment Program says that 20 of the fastest warming countries in the world are in Africa, so that is a very serious problem. Those swarms moving up to 90 miles a day, stripping all vegetation in their path, which means when they leave, the food is gone. That brings me to our slay word, probity, for the quality of having strong moral principles. If we have probity, folks, we will admit that we need to stop our excesses because our excesses are fueling problems here in the United States and all over the world. It's simply not fair. Now, that locust plague is the worst in Kenya in 70 years and in at least 25 years in other parts of the region. The UN warning that the food security of as many as 25 million people, folks, is at risk across that region. The locusts ravage those crops before they are harvested. They wipe out livestock, they wipe out wildlife feed, and they can eat their own body weight. Can you imagine? In plant material, even a small swarm people can consume as much food as 35,000 people eat in a day. That's how serious it is. And that is not the only problem that global warming is showing. We're going to jump over to Australia where they are battling bats. Can you imagine? Hundreds of thousands of bats have invaded the town of Ingham in Queensland, Australia. There are also, in that town, folks, there are so many bats there that they outnumber the number of people. Now, there's 4,300 people there, but there's hundreds of thousands of bats. Residents say it's like a bat tornado all over the town, a large fruit bat colony of biblical plague proportions. That's what they're calling it. Residents say they are dirty, they are smelly, they are noisy. The huge colony has taken over the town's botanical gardens and appears to be getting bigger, not smaller, folks. Very serious. Stop your excesses. We got to stop global warming. I'm Carol Angela Davis. I am Carol Angela Davis. It's time for the slay word of the week. You know what you got to do, right? You got to kill it. You got to slay it. You got to get it. You got to do it. On the job, at home, in the side hustle with the kids, especially with the kids, helping them always level up and know that it's important to level up. The word this week is probity. P-R-O-B-I-T-Y. Probity. It is a noun, so it's a person, place, or thing, and it does come from the Latin word for good. Isn't that something? It means the quality of having strong moral principles, honesty, and decency, uprightness. Let's use it in a sentence. When it comes to the police department, cities need police chiefs of indisputable probity. We know that's true. Or how about this? In a murder trial where the defendant had an alibi, and he said the alibi was his best friend, that he was at his best friend's house, the prosecuting attorney questioned the probity of the alibi. We get that. Let's try and move on to current events. Let's use it when it comes to current events. All right, how about this? So many Americans are disgusted with the Department of Justice now that it is letting any white male crook off and out of prison. We no longer believe there is a lot of probity in our justice system. Okay? All right, now, how about this? When you listen to the way the Democrats go at each other on the debate stage, you do have to wonder how much probity will be left in our democracy once we get to election day. Okay? Probity. All right, it is a noun, so it is a person, place, or thing. You know now that it's a thing. Probity, P-R-O-B-I-T-Y. It comes from the Latin word for good, and it means having strong moral principles. We could use a lot more of that in this country. Honesty and decency, uprightness. I'm Carol Angela Davis. I thank you for watching. You can get me every day, the slay word coming out every week. And of course, you can always get me on Instagram at Carol Angela Davis. Notice I changed my Instagram name from at Carol Angela D to at Carol Angela Davis. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time. I am Carol Angela Davis. Oh, yes, folks, I got you news. We're going to talk politics. We got to talk about these elections from now through the election. Folks, Everybody is talking about Bernie Sanders and socialism, Bernie Sanders and his Green New Deal, Bernie Sanders and all his talk about Medicare, Bernie Sanders trying to get rid of the student loans, Bernie Sanders trying to make college free. Okay, folks, all right, they say Bernie's plans are just too expensive and they're just going to cost the country too much. But guess what? Former U.S. Commerce Secretary under Bill Clinton, Robert Reich, here's what he says. He says the cost of not doing something big is even greater. You better pay attention, people. Student loan debt. Oh, yeah, I know you're familiar with that. Student loan debt has risen from $260 billion, in 2004 to $1.4 trillion, folks, in 2017. Over that same period, you should know that average debt jumped from $18,650 to $38,000, folks, and the number of people over 60 over 60 with student loan debt. They actually want us to think that that's okay. Over 60 with student loan debt, folks. That number has quadrupled in the last decade from 700,000 to 2.8 million people over 60 with student loan debt. Folks, they are never going to pay that debt off. They've been paying that debt so long. They're now over 60. They're never going to pay it off. They're not going to be able to live well. Lucky if they can feed themselves. And oh, did I say they want to do something to Medicare now to take that from them? Come on, people. Wake up. Come on now. As of March 2019, U.S. student loan borrowers owed a collective $1.6 trillion in federal and private student loan debt. Now, don't forget, the private student loan debt, those are the banks. I remember we bailed them out. And don't forget, the federal money, that's your money because you pay in taxes. That's your money, okay? These numbers I just gave you, they are according to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, so they do know a little bit about money. That brings me to our slay word probity for honesty and decency, uprightness. Folks, as a country, surely as a citizen, probity is important, people. You have to know, the billionaires are laughing all the way to the bank, folks. They are falling out laughing while they are literally sucking the money out of your pocket and vacuuming it right into theirs, okay? So, we got to stop getting played here. Academic data from Measure 1 says as of December 2018, 92% of student loans are owned by the U.S. Department of Education. You own your own loan. You're the voters. Don't forget that. And yes, borrowers can postpone those loans through forbearance or deferment, but you know that interest, it just keeps on racking up, folks. Can't stop that interest. They're going to get that money out of you one way or another, okay? So you are guaranteed to never get ahead in life. Is this what you want? Come on, people. There is a name for it, just so you know. I mean, some people have other names for the fix, but there's a name for what they're doing to us. Folks, you remember this. You took history. It's called indentured servitude. I mean, that's the real part. Keeping it real, that's what it is. Now, remember, Republican administrators have given tremendous tax cuts, tremendous to corporations and the wealthy. And these cuts were always touted as something that would stimulate the economy and make your life better off. And you might think that they did, but have they? Have you really had any real change? Are you just a tad bit better off while the rich are so much better off? It is utterly mind-blowing. All right, these breaks have simply not generated enough economic growth because if they had, your kids would not be living in your house. Okay? Love them to death, but get out of my house. But they can't because they can't even afford to live on their own. And guess what? You would not have to work well into your 70s just to survive. Oh, and did I mention those student loans that you're still paying off, even though you're in your 60s? Come on, people. America's top 10% now average more than 9 times as much income, folks, as the bottom 90%. This is according to data analyzed by UC Berkeley economist Emmanuel Saez. He says Americans in the top 1% average over 39 times more income than the bottom 90%. Stop. The Congressional Budget Office says since 1979, the before-tax incomes of the top 1% of America's households, guess what, folks? They have increased more than 7 times faster than the incomes of the bottom 20%. We got to stop that. And when you look at the top 1/10 of 1%, woohoo! They take in over 196 times the income of the bottom 90%. That would be no, we're stopping that. In the United States, the income gap between the rich and everyone else has been growing markedly by every single statistical measure for the last 30 years. Enough. It's time to do something about it. Put whatever label you want to. I don't care if you call it hoggy or doggy or woggy or soggy or whatever. I don't care what you call it. It has to change right now. It's big change. We got to make it. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. Consumer confidence rose less than expected in February. The Consumer Confidence Index is coming in at 130.7 for February, up from 130.4 in January. So that's just a 0.3 of a point rise. But economists had expected it to go up all the way to 132.6. Now, what does it mean for you? Well, consumer confidence, that index is a measure of how you feel about the U.S. economy. That means how you feel about current business and employment conditions and your expectations for income in the next 6 months. So it didn't rise that fast because you're getting a little antsy, and we understand why. It's used as an indicator of the overall health of the economy, and it is a measure for the Conference Board, and it is conducted by Nielsen. That does bring me to our slay word, probity, for having strong moral principles. You know, when you have an administration without apparent probity, it does not inspire confidence in anything. And if you are a person of color and you're constantly under fire by the White House, it's hard to have confidence in your ability to move forward in any way, shape, or form. So that's the problem there. It's now built into the economy. Well, when that consumer confidence index falls or does not rise as high as economists expected that it should, that means you're pessimistic regarding your expected financial situation, and that's not good. Because if you are pessimistic, you tend to buy less. You're going to spend less. You're going to buy less goods and services, which means the economy is going to get stimulated less. It is a vicious cycle, but do not feed the beast. Because if you got to stop spending. Because if you worry about that and you feed that beast, you're going to be, in the end, you're going to be in trouble, and the billionaires are still going to go home with all your money in their pocket, and they're going to laughing all the way to the bank at you, okay? Meanwhile, the Conference Board has another index that measures how you feel about the current business and labor environment today. It fell. So remember, the first one was 6 months. This, how you're looking forward to 6 months. This one is today. That one fell. That is the present situation index, and it dropped from 173.9 in January all the way down to 165.1 in February. Get me on Instagram and Twitter, Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis. Okay, did you hear this one? An economics professor at Simpson College in Iowa is under arrest for the murder of her husband. All right, her name is Go-Won Park. She's 41. Apparently, she emailed her students this week and told her classes would be canceled because of a personal issue, I'll say. Police were summoned to Park's West Des Moines home, and when they got there, they found her performing CPR on her husband, 41-year-old Sung Nam. Now, according to the criminal complaint, Park allegedly bound Nam's hands and feet with zip ties, and then used rope to tie him to a chair in the home. She then stuffed an item of clothing in his mouth, this is what the police say, to prevent him from yelling, and she placed duct tape over his entire mouth and then duct tape a towel over his entire head. All right, when he was found unresponsive with ligature marks on the front of his neck and throat. Does that mean she tried to strangle him too? Please stop. Bringing me to our slay word, probity, for the quality of having strong moral principles. We kind of do expect to have probity in our college professors, but apparently not. Okay? And it just gets crazier from there. We have another story for you. This one is from New York State, where a 22-year-old woman is facing second-degree murder charges for abandoning her baby daughter. Yes. Moments after giving birth. Yes. Police say she left the infant out in the cold to die, and it died. Her name is Nicole Lehman, and the body of her newborn girl, Sophia Grace Haddon, was found in a vacant lot near a walking trail there in Port Jervis. The baby's umbilical cord was still attached. That's what police say. They also say the baby was born alive and that Lehman abandoned the baby in the freezing cold temperatures in a vacant lot where the baby died of exposure. What is wrong with her? Lehman faces 25 years to life in prison if convicted, and she is being held, as you might expect, without bond. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis. A top U.S. official now says the spread of coronavirus in the U.S. does appear to be inevitable, that it's becoming a pandemic. And that is the word from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, saying, and I quote, "It's not a question of if this will happen, but when it will happen and how many people in this country will be severely affected. Disruption to everyday life might be severe." Now, more than 77,000 coronavirus cases have been confirmed in China, where it was first detected. More than 2,000 cases have been identified in other countries, including 57 right here in the U.S., which includes 40 that are people who were repatriated from that Diamond Princess cruise ship. So what is the coronavirus? Is it a biological weapon that just got out? or a disease that spread from wild animals in the open market? And you do have to ask, because Wuhan, China, of course, is where the Wuhan Institute of Virology, Chinese Academy of Sciences, is located. This institute studies the prevention and control of emerging infectious diseases. Why did it take so long for China to report this disease when this is the business of one of their premier labs? It just seems like they should have been more on top of this. It doesn't make sense. The lab is responsible for the prevention and control of new infectious diseases and biosafety in order to meet the needs of early warning, of detection, of research and biosecurity prevention systems for newborn and strong infectious diseases in China. It's also involved in virus seed storage centers. That's kind of scary, okay? China says the first infection came from an animal, probably from a pangolin in the open air market. But why didn't they tell us this sooner? Why didn't they report it sooner? It does seem to be suspicious, okay? We know China's doing everything they can to stop this and get their hands around it, but it does still seem like they should have banned wild animals in these open markets much earlier, and maybe they didn't because China knows that these animals may not be the true origin of the disease, folks. Maybe it came from research being done at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Maybe it got out by mistake. Maybe we should know that, especially since it could actually kill us. The novel coronavirus is a huge challenge, folks, for global health. It represents a pattern. Viruses that start in animals and jump to humans. We're talking SARS, we're talking HIV, Ebola, and even measles. These are all diseases that were introduced to humans, okay, with deadly effects via animals. And as humans encroach more and more into animal habitats, it's believed these spillover events may become more common. So we need open and honest conversation to stay safe, and we need to know that global warming will only make this worse because, of course, as animal habitats are destroyed, we know animals are going to come closer and closer to us. So let's all keep it together, folks. Again, we have to all stay on top of the issues, know what we're doing, and make sure we vote so we don't get played, because this is all very serious. And frankly, it's about to get even more serious when it hits the U.S. for real, and our lives are in jeopardy. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis. I've got your cannabis news. Oh boy, folks. Now, National Football League player Greg Robinson is facing prison time after the cops say they found 157 pounds of marijuana in his vehicle. Robinson, you should know, is an offensive lineman. He played last season with the Cleveland Browns, so you may know of him. He was jailed in Texas after getting booked by the DEA at a checkpoint near the El Paso, Mexico border. He was reportedly with someone by the name of Jaquan Tyreek Bray. Both are reportedly now charged with possession of marijuana with intent to sell. Apparently, Robinson, Bray, and a third person were driving from Los Angeles to Louisiana in a rented SUV on Interstate 10 through a remote section of West Texas. Apparently, they passed a Border Patrol agent with a drug-sniffing dog, and the dog detected the scent of marijuana. The agent radioed ahead to the patrol's checkpoint 83 miles southeast of El Paso, and, well, you know what happened after that. Agents say they found several large duffel bags containing vacuum-sealed black bags containing what tested positive as marijuana. They also say they found glass jars and packaging equipment along with $3,100 in cash. Now, this is really, it just gets crazier. The third person, there was a third person arrested. Now, that person was not arrested but stopped. That person is apparently an Uber driver who ran errands for Robinson and had not agreed that marijuana would be in the vehicle when he made the drive. He had text messages to prove this, and that's what the police say, so that person was not charged. The Cleveland Browns apparently had already told Robinson that they would not be re-signing him, which made him a free agent. And the NFL has a strict ban on the drug. But you know what? I still say, I'm sorry, but after all the money that's being made by the millionaires and billionaires on cannabis and all the people of color, all they're doing is sitting up in the jail cells or still going to jail for it, no matter what kind of quantities they have. I'm not saying this guy should have had the marijuana. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you need to decide, if you're on the jury, whether or not you're going to punish him and send him to prison for it, because we know what happens to the real big bad criminals. They go in the front door of the prison and go out the back door if they are associated with the White House or in any way, shape, or form, or the Russians, of course, and while everybody else is in jail. Then you got the people making millions and billions on marijuana while all the black and brown people are still in jail. I don't hear them making any kind of ruckus to get them out. So why are you continuing to send black and brown people to prison for marijuana? Not saying it's right, saying find another way to punish them, because guess what? They're not going to get pardoned. If they have a problem and when the laws change, they're not getting expunged in most of these places. They're not getting an opportunity to be economically impacted by marijuana after the whole industry was made on their backs. So now you're going to send them to prison when all the other white-collar criminals doing all kinds of horrible things, some of the worst crimes in the country, are walking in the front door of the prison, walking out the back door, or sitting there for a few years until they get pardoned by the White House. It's not fair. Justice is not for just us. Justice has to be across the board. So you have to think about that when you're on these juries. I'm Carol Angela Davis. I am Carol Angela Davis. Okay, folks, I don't have good news for you if you're in Georgia, because from Georgia, state lawmakers there are pushing to recriminalize possession of small amounts of hemp. Now remember, hemp became legal as a result of the 2018 Farm Bill, but in Georgia and under a bill approved by the Georgia House of Representatives Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee, and I quote, anyone possessing green leafy hemp or transporting hemp plants would be required to carry paperwork proving they are working for a licensed hemp business, unquote. Now, under the measure House Bill 847, anyone without a license caught with less than an ounce of hemp plant would be subject to punishment of up to 1 year in jail or a fine of up to $1,000. Now, please note that this is the same penalty for charges of misdemeanor marijuana possession. Now, that measure is soon going to face a vote from the full House before it goes before the state Senate. The Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, it says the state is trying to criminalize excuse me, a legal substance. Now, one of the reasons for this move is the cost of testing for the THC that's in the hemp. It's very expensive. Since hemp became legal at the federal level, several cities and counties in the Atlanta metropolitan area have stopped making arrests for low-level marijuana offenses, citing the prohibitive cost of lab testing to distinguish hemp from marijuana. Please understand where this is going. This is very serious for black and brown communities particularly. Republican State Representative Scott Turner, he voted against the measure. He said that passage of the law would lead to police seizing the assets of people who possess legal hemp. Also, Democratic Representative Matthew Wilson, he voted against the measure. He said that the logic behind outlawing a substance because police found testing to be too difficult or expensive is simply not sound. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis. I've got your cannabis news. Okay, the question in Chicago is this. Should Chicago put a cannabis dispensary near an addiction treatment facility? That's what's playing out in Chicago's upscale West Town neighborhood. All right, licensed cannabis company NewMed, it wants to open a dispensary on the second floor of a building whose entrance would be on the same block as Haymarket Center. That is an addiction treatment center, folks, that sees visits from about 500 people a day. The psychologist, who is also the president and CEO of Haymarket, he says addiction treatment, he says he's concerned. He says that a cannabis dispensary would just be too much of a temptation for people who are already struggling with addiction and could trigger a relapse. Yeah. He adds, quote, there are only two outcomes to substance use disorder. Either you get better or you die. So I'm going to have individuals with life-threatening medical issues having to pass through that to get into treatment here, unquote. Now, come on, people, that doesn't make sense. And guess what? NewMed is not the only one trying to do this, going for the money. All right, Acreage Holdings has proposed opening one of its Nature's Care retail shops at a location about 3 blocks from Haymarket Center. Haymarket CEO says he knows he cannot keep everybody out. He cannot block every dispensary that wants to locate there in the neighborhood, but he says he is hoping to create a buffer zone of at least several blocks. So that just sounds like it makes sense to me. You got a buffer zone for kids when it comes to alcohol and stuff like that. It just makes sense to me. All dispensary licenses are issued by regulators at the state level. Dispensaries planning to operate in Chicago, well, they do have to also gain the approval of the city's Zoning Board of Appeals. So my question to the Zoning Board of Appeals is, why don't you handle this? What are you doing? There obviously needs to be a zoning decision made, just like there is about alcohol and kids. Now, we do understand that there is some conversation that cannabis can be assistive in the addiction process, but you still need to make sure that those dispensaries and those addiction treatment centers are far enough away from each other so you can give people a shot who are really trying and struggling to overcome addiction. I'm Carol Angela Davis. I am Carol Angela Davis. I've got your cannabis news. We're going to the great state of Kentucky, where recreational weed is not legal. Medical marijuana is not legal. The question is it about to change? This week, Kentucky lawmaker Representative Cluster Howard pre-filed a new marijuana-related bill. If it goes into effect, it's going to do the following. If it passes, it'll do the following. Adults 21 and older, you'll be able to purchase, possess, and consume marijuana. Also, the bill is going to decriminalize the possession of less than 1 ounce of cannabis, and it's going to establish a framework for regulating and taxing recreational retail sales. Also, the proposal is going to put the state's Alcoholic Beverage Control Board in charge of regulating and administering legal weed. It's going to issue 4 licenses. That's going to be a cultivator license, a processing license, a lab testing license, and a retail license. So you have to get one of those licenses in order to operate. In addition, each county in the state is going to be allowed to have up to 2 retailers. Now, these are legal retailers, of course. Larger counties can have more than 2, but no more than 1 retailer per 2,300 residents. Now, legal retailers in Kentucky, you should also know, are only going to be allowed to sell cannabis and cannabis products. Tax revenues, this is really interesting what they're doing over there in Kentucky with the tax revenues, and I hope a lot of other states take notice, because if this passes, tax revenues are going to fund public retirement funds. Yeah. Specifically, 75% of those weed taxes are going to go to the Kentucky Employees Retirement System. And meanwhile, the other 25% is going to go to the Kentucky Teachers Retirement System. So interesting moves being made there in Kentucky. They waited, but you know what? Guess what? They're going to make some moves, and hopefully they're going to improve on what others have done. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis. I thank you so much for watching. I got your cannabis news. I want to tell you this. High Times Holding Corp, High Times, the publication that's been around for forever. It's received notification from the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, or FINRA, that it has been granted finally a trading symbol. So it can now list on the public markets. Now, FINRA's approval means that investors in High Times Holding Corp can begin trading their shares in the company. So far, no word yet on the start of a trading date. High Times is the world's best-known cannabis brand. It's been around for over 40 years, folks. To date, more than 23,000 people have become shareholders in High Times Holding and its Regulation A+ offerings. I have to tell you, I bought the stock. Well, I bought an investment, I should say, back in, I think it was like May or June of last year. And I was beginning to wonder, like, what the heck is going to happen to because I don't have any money to waste, just like you don't. So I'm really happy to hear this. Regulation A+ offerings lower the barrier of entry for public investments. That's why for a minimum investment of $99, and no, I'm not advertising, that's equal to 9 shares at $11 a share, anybody can claim a stake in that company. So that's how I got it, because I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. All right, now with its approval to list and trade shares on public exchanges, High Times is set to implement its vision, I guess. This year, High Times says it's going to expand into retail experiences with its first 2 brick and mortar dispensary locations. They are in Los Angeles and in Las Vegas, Nevada. Good locations. The company also says it's going to add nearly a dozen more events. It has those Cannabis Cup Awards, and increase its footprint to 25 locations, both internationally and in the United States, people. In 2018, High Times acquired, are you ready for this? Dope Magazine, Culture Magazine, and the website Green Rush Daily. The company apparently trying to cement its place as the largest name in cannabis and the ultimate, it says, media destination for cannabis consumers. So you can make a decision. If you think you want to get it, go to High Times, to the website, and I'm sure there'll be some instructions there on how to invest if you think it's something for you. Thanks for watching.